Why should investors overall care about consumer confidence? We certainly talk about it a lot, but I'm not sure I understand exactly what it's sort of most useful for as an indicator.
I guess it goes back to what, how, and for whom. What are you making? How are you going to make it? And who's going to buy it? And the key thing for corporations...
Classic college economics, right?
Yes, that was the first day of Econ 101. But if there's no one to buy your product, then there's no point in making it, and there's no point in having a company. And so consumer-facing companies, or even companies that, are intermediaries, need to understand what consumers are thinking. Sometimes what they think doesn't match what they do. And that's why I suggest that people just don't look at the headline, but look in the details. So for example, like you said, our measure didn't really move that much when inflation was raging. But again, people were employed. And so if consumers are fearing their jobs or their employment, then they tend to pull back. That is real. And they start economizing. And certainly that means demand destruction for companies. And so if companies get a whiff that consumers aren't happy and that even if they're not being let go, but they're holding back on spending, then that impacts their bottom lines. Not every index, even in our own survey, is necessarily leading. Some of them are reactionary, but a number of measures have shown that when consumer confidence does crater, and also it's linked to the labor market, that portends slower economic growth in the future.
So the forward picture for sentiment sounds like it might be kind of complicated, right? On the one hand, you've got inflation expectations that might tick up, and that might drive some indicators, whereas the labor market, whether we get a good or a bad jobs report, that might tell a different story for some of your indicators. So what do you think we might see play out over the next couple of indicator releases?
Yes, just thinking about Michigan again, their headline contains a number of indicators that relate to inflation. And we saw in the most recent inflation reading for personal consumption expenditures that inflation is rising, both overall and also less volatile components like food and energy. And indeed, when we look where inflation is rising, it's definitely rising among goods, especially those goods that would be imported from abroad. So I would imagine that might put downward pressure on Michigan's measure. For our measure, again, our headline does not include inflation. Adverse job market data could cause our measure to weaken at the end of September because consumers will perceive that as a signal that companies are now looking to let people go, and they might be next.